Verses 8 to 14. Philip's answer to this question, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient, v7. Master, it is to no purpose to talk of buying bread for them, for neither will the country afford so much bread, nor can we afford to lay out so much money. Ask Judas, who carries the bag. 200 pence of their money amount to about 6 pounds of ours, and, if they lay out all that at once, it will exhaust their fund, and break them, and they must starve themselves. Grotius computes that 200 pennyworth of bread would scarcely reach to 2,000, but Philip would go as near hand as he could, would have every one to take a little, and nature, we say, is content with a little. See the weakness of Philip's faith, that in this strait, as if the master of the family had been an ordinary person, he looked for supply only in an ordinary way. Christ might now have said to him, as he did afterwards, Have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? Or, as God to Moses in a like case, Is the Lord's hand waxen short? We are apt thus to distrust God's power when visible and ordinary means fail, that is, to trust Him no further than we can see Him. The information which Christ received from another of His disciples concerning the provision they had. It was Andrew, here said to be Simon Peter's brother, though he was senior to Peter in discipleship, and instrumental to bring Peter to Christ, yet Peter afterwards so far outshone him that he is described by his relation to Peter. He acquainted Christ with what they had at hand, and in this we may see the strength of his love to those for whom he saw his master concerned, in that he was willing to bring out all they had, though he knew not but they might want themselves, and any one would have said, Charity begins at home. He did not go about to conceal it, under pretense of being a better husband of their provision than the master was, but honestly gives in an account of all they had. There is a lad here, paid Arian, a little lad, probably one that used to follow this company, as settlers do the camp, with provisions to sell, and the disciples had bespoken what he had for themselves, and it was 5 barley loaves, and 2 small fishes. Here, the provision was coarse and ordinary, they were barley loaves. Canaan was a land of wheat, do 8:8, its inhabitants were commonly fed with the finest wheat, PS 81:16, the kidneys of wheat, do 32:14, yet Christ and his disciples were glad of barley bread. It does not follow hence that we should tie ourselves to such coarse fare, and place religion in it. When God brings that which is finer to our hands, let us receive it, and be thankful, but it does follow that therefore we must not be desirous of dainties, PS 23:3, nor murmur if we be reduced to coarse fare, but be content and thankful, and well reconciled to it. Barley bread is what Christ had, and better than we deserve. Nor let us despise the mean provision of the poor, nor look upon it with contempt, remembering how Christ was provided for. It was but short and scanty, there were but 5 loaves, and those so small that one little lad carried them all, and we find, 2 Key 4:42-43, that 20 barley loaves, with some other provision to help out, would not dine 100 men without a miracle. There were but 2 fishes, and those small ones, Diopsaria, so small that one of them was but a morsel, Pisciculi acidi. I take the fish to have been pickled, or soused, for they had not fire to dress them with. The provision of bread was little, but that of fish was less in proportion to it, so that many a bit of dry bread they must eat before they could make a meal of this provision, but they were content with it. Bread is meat for our hunger, but of those that murmured for flesh it is said, they asked meat for their lust, PS 78:18. Well, Andrew was willing that the people should have this, as far as it would go. Note, a distrustful fear of wanting ourselves should not hinder us from needful charity to others. See here the weakness of his faith in that word, but what are they among so many? To offer this to such a multitude is but to mock them. Philip and he had not that actual consideration of the power of Christ, of which they had had such large experience, which they should have had. Who fed the camp of Israel in the wilderness? He that could make one man chase 1,000 could make one loaf feed 1,000. The directions Christ gave the disciples to seat the guests, v10 make the men sit down, though you have nothing to set before them, and trust me for that. This was like sending Providence to market, and going to buy without money. Christ would thus try their obedience. Observe, 1. The furniture of the dining room. There was much grass in that place, though a desert place. See how bountiful nature is, it makes grass to grow upon the mountains. PS 147:8. This grass was uneaten. God gives not only enough, but more than enough. Here was this plenty of grass where Christ was preaching. The gospel brings other blessings along with it. Then shall the earth yield her increase. PS 67:6. This plenty of grass made the place the more commodious for those that must sit on the ground, and served them for cushions, or beds, as they called what they sat on at meat. Est 1:6, and, considering what Christ says of the grass of the field, Mt 6:29-30, these beds excelled those of Ahasuerus. Nature's pomp is the most glorious. 2. The number of the guests, about 5,000, a great entertainment, representing that of the gospel, which is a feast for all nations. Isa 25:6, a feast for all comers. The distribution of the provision, v. 11. Observe. It was done with thanksgiving. He gave thanks. Note. We ought to give thanks to God for our food, for it is a mercy to have it, and we have it from the hand of God, and must receive it with thanksgiving. 1 Tim 4:4, 5. And this is the sweetness of our creature comforts, that they will furnish us with matter, and give us occasion, for that excellent duty of thanksgiving. Though our provision be coarse and scanty, though we have neither plenty nor dainty, yet we must give thanks to God for what we have. It was distributed from the hand of Christ by the hands of his disciples, v. 11. Note. All our comforts come to us originally from the hand of Christ. Whoever brings them, it is he that sends them. He distributes to those who distribute to us. In distributing the bread of life to those that follow him, he is pleased to make use of the ministration of his disciples. They are the servitors at Christ's table, or rather rulers in his household, to give to every one his portion of meat in due season. It was done to universal satisfaction. They did not every one take a little, but all had as much as they would, not a short allowance, but a full meal, and considering how long they had fasted, with what an appetite they sat down, how agreeable this miraculous food may be supposed to have been, above common food, it was not a little that served them when they ate as much as they would and on free cost. Those whom Christ feeds with the bread of life he does not stint. PS 81:10. There were but 2 small fishes, and yet they had of them 2 as much as they would. He did not reserve them for the better sort of the guests, and put off the poor with dry bread, but treated them all alike, for they were all alike welcome. Those who call feeding upon fish fasting reproach the entertainment Christ here made, which was a full feast. The care that was taken of the broken meat. The orders Christ gave concerning it, v. 12. When they were filled, and every man had within him a sensible witness to the truth of the miracle, Christ said to the disciples, the servants he employed, gather up the fragments. Note, we must always take care that we make no waste of any of God's good creatures, for the grant we have of them, though large and full, is with this proviso, willful waste only excepted. It is just with God to bring us to the want of that which we make waste of. The Jews were very careful not to lose any bread, nor let it fall to the ground, to be trodden upon. Qui panem contemnat in gravem incidite paupertatem, he who despises bread falls into the depths of poverty, was a saying among them. Though Christ could command supplies whenever he pleased, yet he would have the fragments gathered up. When we are filled we must remember that others want, and we may want. Those that would have wherewith to be charitable must be provident. Had this broken meat been left upon the grass, the beasts and fowls would have gathered it up, but that which is fit to be meat for men is wasted and lost if it be thrown to the brute creatures. Christ did not order the broken meat to be gathered up till all were filled. We must not begin to hoard and lay up till all is laid out that ought to be, for that is withholding more than is meet. Mr. Baxter notes here, how much less should we lose God's word, or helps, or our time, or such greater mercies. The observance of these orders, v. 13. They filled 12 baskets with the fragments, which was an evidence not only of the truth of the miracle, that they were fed, not with fancy, but with real food, witnessed those remains, but of the greatness of it, they were not only filled, but there was all this over and above. See how large the divine bounty is, it not only fills the cup, but makes it run over, bread enough, and to spare, in our Father's house. The fragments filled 12 baskets, one for each disciple. They were thus repaid with interest for their willingness to part with what they had for public service. See 2 Chr 31:10. The Jews lay it as a law upon themselves, when they have eaten a meal, to be sure to leave a piece of bread upon the table, upon which the blessing after meat may rest, for it is a curse upon the wicked man, Job 20:21, that there shall none of his meat be left. Here is the influence which this miracle had upon the people who tasted of the benefit of it. v14 They said, "This is of a truth that prophet." Note: even the vulgar Jews with great assurance expected the Messiah to come into the world, and to be a great prophet. They speak here with assurance of his coming. The Pharisees despised them as not knowing the law, but, it should seem, they knew more of him that is the end of the law than the Pharisees did. The miracles which Christ wrought did clearly demonstrate that he was the Messiah promised, a teacher come from God, the great prophet, and could not but convince the amazed spectators that this was he that should come. There were many who were convinced he was that prophet that should come into the world, who yet did not cordially receive his doctrine, for they did not continue in it. Such a wretched incoherence and inconsistency there is between the faculties of the corrupt unsanctified soul, that it is possible for men to acknowledge that Christ is that prophet, and yet to turn a deaf ear to him.